All right, we're going to give a few minutes to people who are switching over or joining us brand new. And I know there are some of you who have been with us from the morning. So it's been, as we promised, it's been a marathon, but we're really getting close to the final stretch, and we're always leaving the best to the end. So to keep you all engaged and in suspense. So it is my very special, honor to have Sheri Feinzig, who is our faculty member as well at NYU, but she's primarily a partner with IBM's Global Business Services Talent Transformation practice. And as it's been kind of the practice here in this conference, she's going to share some of the innovations that her organization is also doing in the space of people analytics and particularly as it applies to equity and inclusion. Sheri, thank you very much. And the screen is yours now.
Great, thank you, Anna. And I'm honored to be here among this panel of distinguished speakers today. So Anna, when you invited me to contribute in my segment on the topic of workforce planning and skilling, and of course this is all within the context of the theme of the conference, technology, data, and accelerating equity and inclusion. So I plan to touch on all those topics, maybe not quite in the way that might be expected, but let's dive into it. So I think this quote provides us with a really nice analogy of reflecting the hard work that's needed when we bring data and technology, particularly advanced technologies, AI, machine learning, et cetera, to challenging people problems. It's really, really necessary that we do the hard work. It is not just simply plug and play, buy an app and plug it in and you're good to go. You're going to solve all of your equity and inclusion problems. There's a lot of hard work that needs to be done. And on the technology side in particular, to make sure that we protect ourselves from inadvertently perpetuating historical problems and barriers as opposed to actually fixing them. So it's incumbent upon all of us who are approaching this from a data and analytics and technology perspective to be hyper vigilant and cognizant of what data sets we're analyzing, the limitations of our data sets, who's curating those data sets, how are we running our models against them, what diverse voices, if any, are part of those decision-making processes of choosing data, choosing how to model against it, and then implementing those models as well. So incredibly important to be mindful of all of that hard work that's needed when we bring data and technologies to challenges like equity and inclusion. And part of doing the work from the data and tech side, I believe really requires an ethical approach. It's incumbent upon all of us, people who are building these technologies, those of us who are, people who are buying them, implementing them, and all of us who use and interact with these technologies to really understand them and to be able to expect, identify, and have methods and tools for mitigating bias. So IBM has a very strong commitment to an ethical and socially responsible approach to technology. The company's been putting out a whole series of ethical AI tools, open source, available for anyone to use around AI fairness, explainability of AI models, et cetera. And very recently, released this policy guideline around calling on governments to implement 5 policy priorities, which I'll review briefly in a moment. But I want to emphasize, as I said, it's incumbent upon all of us, as well as educational institutions who are doing the work of educating and researching these topics, and governments as well have an important role to play. And why governments? We need a set of standards. We need a set of rules that everyone's playing by, the same set of rules, and being held to those same standards and accountabilities. And that's the role that government can play here. So in terms of these new policy recommendations that IBM's recommending for governments to adopt, one is around strengthening AI literacy throughout society. So again, looking at everyone in the broader ecosystem interacting with these technologies, from developers to users. And how can government help? By making investments as well as recommendations around how to incorporate understanding and learning about these technologies into educational curricula, and providing funding to make sure that diverse voices are coming to the table and being a part of the conversation and the decision-making processes around these technologies. It's also important and necessary to have methods and expectations for assessing and testing for bias, and for taking actions to mitigate, particularly in the realm of high-risk AI decisions. So, these systems are often applied in ways that are very, very impactful on our lives. And in the context of people analytics and HR, of course, things like job-related decisions. So it's really important that there's an expectation that companies will continually and robustly test for mitigation. I would argue, let's expect that bias is going to be there, and let's test for it, and let's put actions in place to mitigate it. We need to be able to audit and have documentation that's auditable, agreed standards, and also enable the development community to be able to apply these methodologies for assessment and testing and mitigating of bias and risk. So, don't just put it on the whole development community, but the government can help to enable how to go about doing these things. Requiring transparency. We should all know when we're interacting with an app or a bot, with some piece of technology as opposed to a human being, for example. When high-risk decisions are being made about us, and those decisions are based on recommendations from AI models, we should be aware that those decisions are happening, and we should have visibility to how those decisions are made. Related to that is making sure that when we see that type of information, we have a way to react to it. We have a way to provide feedback if we think the system's getting things wrong about us. And we need system owners to have some responsibility and accountability for acting on that feedback. And then finally, we need to put guardrails around the use of these technologies as well, to prevent harmful uses and implementation. So, it's not okay for a company, an organization, an individual to develop a technology, put it out there and say, well, I can't control how it's used. Well, actually, we can put limitations around uses for potentially harmful technologies, licensing clauses, et cetera. So just one example that I wanted to highlight that's very, very recent of the hard work that's required when we're applying data and technology to these very challenging societal problems. But I don't think that that's enough. I don't think that data and technology are enough to really get to the step change that we're looking for in terms of accelerating equity and inclusion in organizations. So I think we need to go beyond that. And I'll put this in the context of the so-called talent shortage. So I think this is a real challenge, and I understand and appreciate it. Business leaders have been lamenting the talent shortage for years, even through the pandemic, and kind of conveying that there just aren't enough talented people out there to do the work that's required for their businesses to succeed. But what if we ask the question in a different way? Is it really a shortage of talent, or is it that we keep going back to look for the same talent that we've had before? I would argue that there is plenty of talent out there, and that there always has been. And that the bigger issue is not a shortage of talent, but our inability as a society to see that talent and to allow that talent to come forward and make contributions. This is just a small sampling of the incredible, many incredible people who have, diverse people, people of color who have made incredible contributions to US society over the decades. And they somehow have managed to do it by overcoming nearly insurmountable barriers to be able to bring their skills and their talent and their capability to bear. And if we think about all of the other people who, for whatever reason, just were not able to persevere, to devote the energy that's required to fight all of those barriers and make it through to the other side. It's tragic to think about the talent and the capabilities that have been lost over the years. And it does take a lot of energy to overcome the constricting environment. This is our history. We really should acknowledge this if we're worried about a talent shortage. Not only is it our history, it's also our present. So these challenges, they persist. They're still here today. This is Rita Moreno, Puerto Rican actress, dancer, singer, and an EGOT, one of those rare individuals who has won an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony Award. Quite the incredible person and quite the talent indeed. At age 89, she is still reflecting back on how society has shaped an image where she was questioning her own value and her own self-worth. So these are the challenges that I don't believe that data and technology alone are going to be able to overcome. Because the data and technology don't see the constricting environment. They just see the results of it. So to walk through a quick example, hypothetical, imagine there were two equally talented people born into very different circumstances. And if we start with the person on the right, this person had the good fortune of being born into a situation where even before birth had excellent prenatal care, lots of wonderful opportunities growing up to develop skills, capabilities, make connections, get into the right college, and kind of springboard into having sponsors and mentors and professional networks that can lead to a successful career. Equally talented individual on the left may have been born into very different circumstances. Maybe during upbringing, it wasn't an optimal environment, prior to birth and during childhood and so forth. Maybe her parents had to make some really hard decisions along the way because of limited financial circumstances. Maybe the schools she went to weren't as enriching and she didn't have all the latest and greatest tools and technologies and even textbooks and other learning materials. And maybe she faced some of those constricting environmental factors that caused her to question her self-worth and her value along the way. So very different circumstances, these things weigh on us. They inform us, they develop us. And it is those rare people who can break through those difficult circumstances on the left, but there aren't, think of all the people who for whatever reason can't. And if we think about what our technology sees, technology is not seeing the background, it's seeing the results, and our organizations are predominantly populated with people who look like the person on the right, and many fewer people who look like the person on the left. So when we then apply our models to these historical data sets, they're going to find features and variables that will point to people who look like the person on the right. Now, I'm not at all suggesting that we shouldn't hire the person on the right. We need all of the talented people that we can find and bring into our organizations. But my point is that by simply applying algorithms to historical data, we, by definition, are going to be recreating the past as opposed to creating a new, more equitable, more inclusive future. So again, we need to do the hard work associated with applying data and technology. And we've seen throughout this conference, by the way, amazing examples of applying data and tech to various aspects of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging challenges. There's a lot we can do with our tools. But I think we need to do even more. And the more that I think we need to do is to actually not recreate the past, but to systematically and mindfully create a new future, to create new pathways to opportunities. IBM has a long history of advocating, taking action, advocacy policies that support opening up opportunities to all qualified people. Even at IBM, the events over the past year have really caused the company to reflect and say, you know what, we need to do more. And what I'd like to share with you now are a few what I consider bold examples of the things that we need to do differently to create a new future. So one is a tech reentry program. So IBM recognizes that there are many reasons that people leave the workforce, either by choice or out of necessity. And it can be really hard to come back in after a period of time of being out, particularly in the tech industry, because technology, skills, and jobs and technologies change so rapidly. So IBM put this program into place to create a path to ease back in after taking a career break. This is a paid, we call it a returnship. This is people who are coming back to resume their career where it took off. And the people who are in the program will have a dedicated mentor to help them along the way. So we're not just going to throw people back into the deep end and hope they can remember how to swim. We're actually going to provide that mentor and that support that's needed. In addition, they'll be going through this program as part of a cohort so they can support and learn from each other. Another example is our apprenticeship program. So this is an opportunity or a pathway to build technical skills also while getting paid. And why do I emphasize the getting paid part? Because that is so important. Unpaid internships and apprenticeships and so forth do not create a level playing field. They create an unlevel playing field. Those are available to people who can afford to take the time to go through those activities and programs and not get paid for it. Many people cannot afford to do that. So the paid part is really important. And this provides people who don't have an advanced degree to get started in a tech career. Pathways in Technology, Early College, High School. That is a mouthful. We affectionately abbreviate that to PTech. And PTech is an innovative public school model that has provided new opportunities and new pathways for students who otherwise would face formidable barriers in getting into a STEM career. So what does PTech do? It provides a grade 9 to 14. So it's essentially the traditional four high school years of grades 9 to 12 in the US, plus 2 years that would lead to a college associate's degree. So it's kind of this combination of the best of all worlds of high school, college, as well as career. And then the way that it's set up, IBM is not the only company involved in PTech. There are actually about 500 industry partners, and those industry partners are making a commitment to not only support these schools, but also to provide opportunities to then come in, have internships at the organizations, and potentially build a career there. So it's a really great model. Started in Brooklyn, New York. There are now PTechs in, I believe, about 18 countries, 100,000 students. So it really has expanded quite a bit. Just a little bit more on PTech. What happens with these students? Well, some of them, as I said, will get internships and ultimately jobs at the industry partner companies. We've, as of about a year ago, had 30 of these students working at IBM, all students of color and all awesome. I can tell you, I've heard them speak. I've met some of these students and they are wonderful. And one of the data points that's particularly near and dear to my heart is that the vast majority actually go on for their 4-year degree. So it truly is a pathway to success for these students. One more that I will highlight, and that is 110. So this is not necessarily, this is not an IBM initiative per se, but IBM is a co-founding part of the consortium of companies, about 40 companies. in the Fortune 500 whose CEOs have committed to creating 1 million jobs for Black talent in 10 years. So that's the 110, 1 million jobs in 10 years. And notably family sustaining jobs. And I'll get to what I mean by that in a moment. But this is a program that is just getting started, co-founded by our previous CEO, Ginny Rometty, and really an exciting, bold example of what's possible. So what do we mean by family sustaining jobs? These are jobs that pay a living wage. And they're also jobs that are not expected to be replaced by automation in the near term. So they're attractive jobs, and they're also accessible. They are accessible to this talented population who maybe don't have a 4-year college degree and don't have years and years and years of experience that jobs often require in their job postings. So this is really conceptualized and set up as an ecosystem, and an ecosystem among employers, those partner companies that are committed not only to hiring these talent, but providing an opportunity where they will be successful and creating those inclusive cultures. As well as talent developers, so leading educational and skill building organizations. And then, of course, the Black talent themselves, skilled individuals who really are looking for these types of opportunities. It is early days still in this program. The logistics and everything are still being worked out, but those 44 or so companies that are part of it today are planning to post, I believe, about 2,000 jobs to get things started. So really exciting opportunity here. So I want to loop back to the theme of the conference, of course, which is data and technology. So with all of these new pathways that I've been talking about, is there a role for data and technology? And there absolutely is. So first of all, these programs can't operate, they wouldn't exist without the technology that's needed to implement them and run them. On the data and analytics side, there is a crucial role to be played. And that is specifically, we need to understand, are these programs going to work? And what works and what doesn't. So we need really well-designed, rigorous research studies to evaluate the effectiveness of these new pathways, to really get that insight around what works, what doesn't, why, course correct as needed. And when we've identified those successful recipes for these new pathways, then we'll be ready to really, expand deployment of these effective reskilling and opportunity creating initiatives, and really get that game-changing, large-scale impact to create a more inclusive and equitable future. And I'd like to thank you for, again, the opportunity to share these thoughts with you and take any questions that might have come in.
Thank you so much, Sheri. If you want to bring us all back into the room, that would be great. Just a couple of comments. As you were speaking, I was thinking of Kati Kariko, who is now a legend, this Hungarian scientist who actually came up with mRNA vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And you've heard her story, and and it's an immigrant story, and a woman in academia story, and a woman in science. If we start building all of the barriers and the very, very slim chance on which her breakthrough invention was actually acknowledged and then scaled and saved the world.
Absolutely. And if I recall that's her story correctly, Anna, she was mocked for her proposed approach along the way. I mean, she had to fight for this, and she helped save the world, literally.
And with a level of humility and dedication that never really promised much, because she didn't have all of those markers of status, the academic publications she didn't have, because she could not do her research. She didn't have a permanent position for a long time. She was an immigrant with an accent who wasn't accepted the same way in the scientific circles. And here we are, and I'm just, we all should be celebrating people like her. So that's amazing. What I really liked about how you structured your presentation, you really started with the data, you finished with the data and technology, because I do think it's sort of a sandwich situation. At the end of the day, it's all about substance, but without those tools, without measuring impact, giving us feedback around how we are doing, whether we are making a difference, and also our ability to scale. Without data and technology, we're not going to be scaling these amazing initiatives that companies like IBM, who are very forward-looking, are putting out there. So I really, really thank you for sharing. I know this is all kind of you prepared specifically for us here, but I think it's a very inspiring story, and it's also showing that, you know, there's a huge opportunity for us to contribute. So thank you very much, Sheri. Thank you for your work. I am not seeing, I think we exhausted this audience, but it was incredibly helpful, and what a nice optimistic, you know, closure sort of to our session. We have one more final presentation, and that will be the closing of this very, very long day. But I think we're all, you know, very well informed now, empowered and inspired, and your presentation was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Final lap, everyone who is still hanging in there. Our last session, and we will be closing the conference within the next 45 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.